I had mentioned the name of Rabbeinu Bachio, that the human being is the center of the universe. The objective of creation, the endless species, all aspects of existence were only created to be the setting for the human being to meet the challenges of life, the challenges which God presents to him. How do we know this is a reality? That this is, the objective is the human being to address his needs. So I had mentioned what Rabbeinu Bachia says, that he was created, the last of creation, is a confirmation that everything that had preceded him is for him. Why? Because if a person commissions an architect to design a residence, and then you have the contractor, and you have all the various people involved in building the structure, and you have the location, when do you tell the person to come to the location? The one who commissioned all. When everything's complete and it's ready for him to move in, to use it as a residence, then he comes on the scene. God only brought Adam on the scene once everything was in place. And now the world is exactly as God wants it to be, to accommodate and address every conceivable challenge and amenity which Adam needs for his function. And now we're ready to go. So the human being is the center of the universe. And we had said, the challenge is, does the animal aspect of the human being, does that dominate? Or the spiritual component, known as the soul, does that dominate? The spiritual component dominating means that despite the difficulty of the challenge, it does what God wants. And the animal component, which is the body, if that dominates, then you do things which are contrary to the will of God. And that's the challenge of life. And the world has everything there to facilitate both sides. Hopefully, we utilize it for what it's meant to be utilized for, and to refrain, which is the challenge, where we should not participate. He initially was endowed, as we mentioned, with a level of intelligence and clarity, which is one of a kind. In the words of the Midrash, he was able to see from one end of the world to the other. That was his level of understanding, clarity, depth of understanding. There was nothing which was occluded from his understanding. And we find that initially, the only living species that was not created with a counterpart was the human being. Every species, living species, whether it's the fish, whether it's the insect, reptile, domesticated animal, bird, undomesticated, there's a male and a female. The human being was not created with a counterpart. If you read the narrative, how it went, God takes all species and passes it before Adam. Adam names, and the Torah makes it a point in this, names the species, whether it's the lion, whether it's the tiger, whether it's the bird, whether it's the snake, every species was named by Adam. And we explained, what does naming mean? It doesn't mean just putting a label on it. Because of the level and depth of understanding that Adam had due to his divine endowment, he was able to understand every aspect of every species, its physical makeup, its value versus the sum total of existence, and how it's essential to the objective of creation. And each name, if we're able to understand what lies within the name, we'd understand all that. But that was the name that he'd given each species. Everything is contained within those letters of that name, whether it's Aryeh for the lion, whether it's Nesher for the eagle, or Tzvi for the deer, and each one of them, within that word lies every aspect of that species. And the Torah tells us that after he named all of them, he could not find an Azer. He cannot find a species that complements him. It says he came upon all the species. Coming mean he looked at them, he evaluated them, he understood them, and he saw there wasn't anything that had to do which was compatible with what he was. And only after he understood and appreciated that he doesn't have what he needs, God brings a deep sleep upon him, takes an appendage off his body, and creates the woman who's going to be the helpmate, is going to be compatible to every aspect of his being, and to assist him to achieve perfection, to address his objective. So initially he understood there was no one in existence, no species who could be his counterpart. And when he came to that realization, God brings this deep sleep upon him, and he takes an appendage from his body and creates the woman. After he creates the woman, he presents her to Adam. Adam sees her. He says, Etze me'atzomai, basar bibsori. She's a bone of my bones. She's the flesh of my flesh. And he called her Isha. In Hebrew, the word Isha means a woman. Why is she called Isha? Ki mi'ish lukocha. Because she was taken from the man. Ish in Hebrew means the male. So she's called Isha because she's a derivative of the Ish, of the male. And because he had an appreciation, he saw who she was, he understood she is the person who's compatible with every aspect of his being to be able to achieve what he's meant to achieve in terms of his value and his purpose in creation. That's the initial story. So Adam understood what he didn't have. He knew what he was lacking, and there was no counterpart for him. And he understood it like no one understood it. When he came to the realization that he was in need of a counterpart to be compatible with him, God brings this deep sleep upon him, removes an appendage, creates the woman, and he calls it Isha, understanding she is the one. And he has an understanding, she and no one else. Must have been ecstatic. Okay, day of creation. God says to Adam in the Garden of Eden, every tree is permitted to you. The fruit of every tree, except one tree, the tree of knowledge, which is good and evil. And God says to him, I beg of you, I created an unbelievable world. Don't destroy it. Meaning by eating of the tree of knowledge, because you eat of that tree of knowledge, because you shall eat, you will die. Meaning you become subject to death, you become a limited being. And now you're an eternal being. And as the story goes, Chava, his wife, his counterpart, the snake engages in the conversation with her. And somehow he seduces her and convinces her to eat of the tree of knowledge. And she eats of the tree of knowledge. And the moment she eats, she realizes that whatever her unlimited capacity was, it's immediately being compromised, being minimized, and she's no longer the same person. It's like she's feeling life being ebbed out of her. And she goes and takes this fruit, and she says to her husband, Adam, I want you to eat some of this. And which is a separate discussion why he agreed. Because after realizing what it did to her, your wife just brought about something which is the equivalent of suicide. Well, I committed suicide. I want you to commit suicide because I'm your counterpart. No, unfortunately, you made a mistake. You did the wrong thing. You succumbed to the temptation, but I'm not a fool. But Adam did. which is a separate discussion why, and he eats of the tree of knowledge. Immediately, although he radiated before he ate, a radiance that the angels had mistaken his radiance, the radiance of God, and they song to him as they sang to God, he admitted that was minimized immediately. And all of a sudden, he and Chava, they realized they're naked. Till then, they didn't realize they're naked, although they knew they weren't clothed. But all of a sudden now, the nakedness takes on a whole different level of representation. There's a shame and the hiding. And God says, where are you? And they said, we're hiding because we realize we're naked. He says, why do you realize now and not before? Did you eat of the tree of knowledge? And he says to Adam, so they say yes. So he says to Adam, why did you eat of the tree of knowledge? He said, it's Isha Asher Nosati Modi. It's the woman that you gave me. Meaning he pointed a finger of accusation at God. God, you messed my life up. Could you imagine? That's what he said. God, it's your fault. I'm not fully responsible here because it's only due to the wife that you gave me to be my so-called counterpart. She's the one who brought me down. But she couldn't brought me down if you wouldn't have brought it to me. Therefore, there's a degree of culpability to God. I'm not fully at fault. Okay, let's understand what that statement means. So the Talmud says that when he made that statement, God says, Adam, you're a level of ingrate, not to be understood to what degree you're an ingrate. Here I created a woman who's the basis for everything in your life, success-wise, to address all your needs, to be able to meet the objective of creation. And after all said and done, because you failed with her, you're blaming me for your failing. Therefore, you're an ingrate. Why is he such an ingrate? When did God create the counterpart for Adam? If he would have created her initially, like every species has a male and a female, he has his counterpart. Okay, it's one thing. I had no choice. I'm the male, she's the female. But when did God create the woman for him? It's only when he realized, after he named all species and understood to the core of their being, physical, spiritual sense, how they fit into the realm of creation, and he realized he needed a counterpart because they don't conform with who he is. Only then, when he appreciated what he didn't have, God creates the woman for him. So this is after you understand her value. So after you understand her value, all of a sudden, now that you fail, which you're the cause of the failing, who do you blame? You blame God? Therefore, there's a confirmation on the most serious level that you are an ingrate. You're an ingrate. Because if you would have seen it right, you would have immediately admitted. You know, a person has healthy food to eat, but he overeats. And he gets sick because he overeat. So the person who provided food for that person in abundance, all healthy food, he blames his provider. You're the cause of my sickness, that I'm ill. Who told you to overeat? If you would have eaten a modicum of that, you'd be healthy because you chose and you couldn't control your appetite and you overeat. You're blaming me that I caused you to become sick? You see it totally wrong. But again, it's like taking responsibility for something that you are really responsible for. He couldn't admit to see it right because he puts himself in a negative light. Therefore, what do? It's you, it's not me. And that's what Adam did. And he did it to God, and he understands he's talking to God. It's not to be understood. And after he said that, God says what he said, you shall eat by the sweat of your brow. the earth will give forth briars and weeds and so on and so forth. Things are not going to be as easy as they were before. Before, things happen naturally. Now, it'll take a tremendous amount of effort and investment of ability to bring about what initially came naturally. The woman initially, she conceived, she gave birth without pain, without depression, without anything. It happened. Then he curses the snake. When God said to Adam, "You are an ingrate," what did that mean? He was quantifying the essence of the human being. By Adam demonstrating and expressing this characteristic of ingrate, that characteristic becomes part and parcel of the human makeup. And we find it. What is the first expression of that ingrate in humanity? We read about the Tower of Babel. It says they all spoke the same language, so they had a social integration, and they had a meeting of minds, and they said, we're going to build the tower and rebel against God. Why? And the people, these are the 70 root nations of the world, and they're referred to as Bnei Adam, the sons of Adam. These people are the sons of Adam. So the commentators, Rashi cites the Midrash, why they call Bnei Adam. Of course, the Bnei Adam means the human beings. They're not Bnei Chamorim, they're not donkeys, they're not animals. Why they refer to Bnei Adam? So the Midrash explains, because they are, at this point, when their initiatives to build a tower to rebel against God, the sons of Adam. Just as Adam was an ingrate, they are no less ingrates. Why the ingrates? This is post-flood. The world was destroyed. And God allowed that Noah and his family should survive, and they are the descendants of Noah, these 70 families. Understanding that you only exist due to God's mercy and God's attribute of mercy. Is this the way you react? Well, you realize God brought a flood in the past. He may bring another flood. Therefore, we're going to build this tower, and somehow we're going to rebel against him, and we're going to prevent this from happening again. Well, it only happened because mankind failed. What are you trying to accomplish here? You're only alive because, due to God's mercy. And now you people, Bnei Adam, the sons of Adam, there's a repeat of the similar behavior. Rather than seeing it correctly and understanding why God destroyed the world is because they're failing, they say, no, God is not compassionate. God is the one who had no right to destroy the world. What do you mean he had no right to destroy the world? He destroyed the world because the mankind destroyed the world. Because the world couldn't go forward as it was. It was so putrefied due to their misbehavior. They became perverted, corrupted on every level. It has nothing to do with God. It's like a person buys something and has a warranty. And the person takes the thing he buys, this computer, and he abuses it to the nth degree, it stops working. And he returns it to the manufacturer and says, something? You sold me a shoddy product. It's defective. So the manufacturer says, by the way, did you read? And he says, I have a warranty. I want my money back. So he asked, did you use the computer as was directed in the instruction manual? She says, no. Tell us how you used it. In every way that you could abuse that computer and destroy it, that it should no longer function as it's meant to, that's what the person did. But you should have created a different kind of computer. That I'm able to have a tractor go over it, a bulldozer, and it should still function as a computer. Are you in touch with reality? I give you something fully functional, and because of your abuse, you're blaming the manufacturer, giving you something which is a defective product. God gives you a wife, which is the ultimate. And you say to God, look what you did to me. You destroyed my life by giving me this woman. Mankind, they survived the great flood because they are the descendants of Noah. Why did God bring the flood? We don't want this to happen again. This is a replay of the ingrate of Adam. You people are ingrates. They're B'nai Adam. Only the person who has this defect in his character could process it and create this picture and understand it as they understand it. Take it a little further. We're in the 40th year of the desert, the Jewish people. This is the cream of the crop, the chosen nation. All creation is created for them because they will address the objective creation. They accepted the Torah unequivocally at Sinai. They are the descendants of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the holy patriarchs. They have an ability no other nation has. God provided for them certain amenities in the desert that they couldn't have survived without them. The clouds of glory, the wellspring of Miriam, and the manna. What was so special about the man? The special about the man was that any conceivable type of food that you wanted to take on, that characteristic, it nourished the person based on what the person had in mind. It assumed the taste, and according to one, even assumed the texture. When you put it in your mouth and you ate it and digested it, fully nourished, no illness, no negative side to it. But it had, the ultimate was the camp of Israel had to be kept clean. You couldn't have any human waste because there was human waste. You have to go out of the camp. You'd have to bury it to dispose of it. There was something miraculous happened. They ingested it for 40 years. It became absorbed into their inner organs. No waste. Fully digested and absorbed into the bodies. They never had to relieve themselves. Ever. 40 years. And this is the generation, the new generation. This is after the generation of the spies who passed away over that 40-year period. This is the new generation ready to go into Israel. This is the future. And they say to Moshe, you know, we've been ingesting this food for 40 years. It's unheard of. How does a person have an intake without any outtake? You know what we're concerned, what God wants? After eating and ingesting this and digesting it for 40 years, it's going to expand in our intestines, and our intestines is going to burst from this manna. God says immediately, he sends the vipers to stop biting the people, and people stop dying. And God says, Kfuye Tova b'nei Kfuye Tova. You're ingrates who descend from an ingrate. This is the characteristic of Adam. Adam, the founding father of humanity. His characteristic was when he failed, who does he point the accusing finger on? He sees it backwards. To take the ultimate and say, you destroyed my life. It's your fault. God gives him something, which is the ultimate at every level. It spiritualizes them. It nourishes them. It invigorates them. And there's no negative side to it. They say, you know, God, this food that you give us, this miracle food, ultimately, it's going to cause our demise. Because we're going to die because of what you've done. God says, I can't believe it. There's a replay. There's a replay of Adam. There's a replay of the generation of dispersion. But it's the worse than everything is, who are we talking about? We're talking about the chosen people. The ones who stood at Sinai, the ones who were spiritualized, who had Moshe as the leader, who were in the spiritual cocoon for 40 years. The clouds of glory, no illness, a level of clarity. And with all the clarity, you talk like ingrates. So this certain characteristic, it's part of the human genome, genealogy, that you can't escape from it. And every person has to realize that, have an understanding that we all have a certain susceptibility to this, to see it so wrong, where it's at an unconscionable level that we see it wrongly. It's a genetic defect in the human being, and it's something we have to contend with. And I always say the two things. One level is a person's not appreciative. Why is a person more appreciative, less appreciative? Because it depends how you see yourself. The more you feel you're entitled, the less appreciative you are. The less you feel you're entitled, the more appreciative you'll be. What is entitlement dependent upon? It's dependent upon humility. The more humble you are, the less entitled you feel. If you're less entitled, you recognize you're a greater beneficiary of what God provides for you. But if you feel you're totally entitled, there's no appreciation whatsoever. To let you slightly entitled, it's tremendous appreciation. But if you're almost totally entitled, you'll barely be appreciated. You'll say thank you at best. Nothing more than thank you. But in terms of dedicating your life, why? What have you done for me last? No, I remember you once bought me a Hanukkah gift when I was 6 years old. It's 60 years later. What have you done for me in the last 60 years? God, what have you done for me? I remember when I was a kid, I fell off my bike. I needed stitches. Terrific. Doctor was there. What have you done for me for the last 60 years? That you live in this mansion, that you're healthy, that you succeed, that everything's going the way you want it. Of course, that's me. You know, I have a phenomenal mind. I have a charismatic personality. Everybody loves me. I'm the center of the party. I'm the rainmaker. I have the golden touch. I have the Midas touch. God, what do I owe you? What are you talking about? Where are you coming from? Well, don't you realize I'm God's gift to humanity? I'm the ultimate entitled person. So what do I owe God? I owe him nothing. And there are people like this. Many years ago, there was a certain person, he ran for office, for mayor in New York City, in the primaries. It wasn't even a consideration. And he was a very, very wealthy man, not charitable at all. And I once asked him, I said, why aren't you charitable? Because the rich and the poor, if God wants the poor not to have, am I going to interfere with God's program? If God wants them to be needy, that means I'm meddling in God's affairs. Why am I wealthy? Because I'm supposed to be wealthy. Because I am that different kind of person. That's what he chose to give me because I'm special. The other guy's not special. You ever hear such talk? There's a level of ego not to be believed. Because he went from rags to riches. How did he do it? No education, came from a foreign country, barely could speak the language, and he succeeded. Evidently, he has what other people don't have. That's what he made it. See, he's entitled to what he has. The other person, he's born here, and he didn't succeed. You know something? Evidently, it's his own fault. It's his own fault. He deserves nothing. So, as we say, you know, the way you make your bed, that's the way you sleep in the bed. He is eating his own fare. That's it. But that's what it's about. How wrong could you see it? You have to be egocentric to see it this way. But if you're humble and you feel unworthy and you feel privileged despite the lack of entitlement, then you sing God's praises continuously. And everybody has a certain degree, modicum of this entitlement, because otherwise we'd be dedicated to do God's work and we'd be committed to God's script. But, you know, even the person studies, he said, you know, I think I study an hour a day. God, I have a right to live my own life. How much do you want me to give? I give you my right arm. Do you want me to give my left arm? Do you want me to what? How much do you want from me? What are you talking about? Abraham had a child at the age of 99. When he was 37 years old, God says, bring him up as a sacrifice. Could you imagine? His whole life he waited for this son. And God says, bring him up as a sacrifice. After promising him he's going to be like the stars of heaven. Avram, with alacrity, wakes up early in the morning, takes him to the Akedah, to the binding of Isaac. Not a question, not a word. How's this possible? God, what do you want from me? What are you taking from me? This is my whole life. What do you mean it's your life? But the value of your life is only to serve me. But look what I've done for you. I made your name known in the world. I espoused monotheism. He could have said that. He could have processed it this way. He didn't. Because Avram, being the second most humble person who ever walked the face of the earth, he had no sense of entitlement. God gives, God takes. That's where it begins and that's where it ends. I'm here for that. Because whatever you've given me, I'm thankful endlessly because I'm undeserving of it, because I'm entitled to nothing. You know, it's very interesting. We read in Pirkei Avos, against your will, you're born. Against your will, you live. Against your will, you die. What does that be against your will? What's the concept of entitlement? I'm entitled. How can you be entitled? God put you here. You had no choice in the matter. And he put you here that whatever you are, he put you here because he created the setting. Against your will, you live. What does that mean? That means every aspect of your life is endowed to you and you're in that path and not in another pathway, in this lane, not another lane. Some people are in the slow lane. Some people are in the fast lane. Why are some people in the slow lane fast? Because that's where God put you. That's why you're there. That's against your will, you live. So if everything is against your will, and bottom line, that is a reality. So why don't you recognize that there's no such thing as entitlement because he wrote the script. And whatever way your life manifests itself and evolves is because he's the director. He's the producer. There's every aspect of this existence. He's written it. And he continuously directs it. The answer is because we all have egos. The ego is directly connected to our inclination. And this has to do with Adam, the sin of Adam. Adam also had an ego. Self-centeredness. I have a right to eat. I'll make the decision how I'll do it. According to our Arizal, why did Adam eat of the tree of knowledge? Because he said to himself, this was his justification. We read in Pirkei Avos, Lefum Tzara Agra, that the greater the challenge, the greater the reward. Before he ate of the tree of knowledge, everything was clear. He could discern between good and evil. Everything was black and white. The moment he ingested that evil, he became conflicted, and there was like an addiction to evil. Despite the overwhelming addiction, I'll do the right thing. So my level of accomplishment is greater. What are you talking about? You want to be more deserving? God says, do it this way. Well, because I want to have my own input. What do you mean you want to have your own input? Well, I also have a right to say how my life should manifest itself. I can be a greater servant. God says I never asked you to be a greater servant. Be the ordinary guy, the way I made you to be. But that's ego. I'm entitled to make my own decision, to create my own script and design my own resonance and my own life. But you know what God says? The way you make your bed, that's where you're going to sleep. Initially, you could have been in paradise forever. Because you've done what you've done, you're out. And he was disenfranchised. He was driven out of the Garden of Eden, never to come back. He's no longer the special boy on the block. You're persona non grata. Now we have to wait for the new star to come about. The new star on the block was Avram. He was the hero of existence. And when he came, that was the beginning of the new existence, which ultimately culminated in development with the Jewish people at Sinai. We will stop here today, to be continued.